Welcome back to another episode of the Strength and Speed Podcast. I'm your host, Mudgear Battle Alliance Pro and Strength and Speed owner, Evan Preparis. Before we get to today's episode, a quick word from this episode's sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Nutrition of the Mudgear Battle Alliance Pro Team. If you're at the most recent Conquer the Gauntlet race or have been coming to races in the Midwest, you may have seen us giving away Juice Performer. So we're giving away for free at the events we've been at for the pro team. We've got beet juice for kind of pre-race, kind of get that vasodilation of the blood vessels there, and cherry juice for post-race recovery. Also, we've got Yolked. So Yolked is a fertilized egg yolk product. Clinical trials show 3 times the muscle growth. You can check it out. Tastes delicious. They've been out at Savage Race. They've been out into the OCR community for a couple of years now. Really love their stuff. If anyone wants to order some, you can use code STRENGTH20 and save 20% off every single one of your orders. All right, let's get to today's episode. So I've been super busy, so I haven't quite had time to sit down with the guests. So today I'm going to do something a little bit different. I was thinking about doing a Q&A episode, but we've done a bunch of those. We'll do a couple more, but I wanted to do a deep dive into something. So a couple years ago, I wrote this concept for an OCR Pro League. So what I want to do is kind of run through the concept for the OCR Pro League, just to kind of get people's imaginations going. And I think the concept I came up with is pretty good. And you may be thinking, if it's so good, why don't I just implement it? And largely it has to do with time, right? If I could clone myself and make like 6 versions of myself to sit down and do some of this work, I think I could get it going. That being said, I've got a lot of other stuff going on, both in my personal life and then my actual day job in the military, and then all the stuff I do on OCR, in addition to actually training and racing for OCR. So I consider myself an athlete first, which is why the racing and the performing at races tends to take priority over some of the media coverage, and I try to leave some of the other media coverage to some of the other people in the OCR industry to cover some of that, and really focus my podcast and my articles on areas that I don't think are currently being touched. What I don't want is every OCR podcast and every OCR article focused on the same thing, and then you just get, it's like, all right, well, which source do I go to for my information? It doesn't matter because they're all putting out the same thing. So when I write something, I try to put something out unique. So I've been writing for OCR Buddy and the OCR Report recently. Also got a bunch of articles coming out on Mudgear real soon. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to run through my concept for what an OCR Pro League looks like and how we can theoretically make it work. So the first thing I did was take a look at OCR World Championships, which is Adrian B. Hanada's event, and why it was so successful. And kind of the simple answer, it is mutually beneficial. So the races get to call themselves World Championship qualifiers. They help feed into the World Championship, but there's not a whole lot of oversight, right? So like there's a couple of standards that OCR World Championships eventually wants the companies that are qualifiers to do. It's things like basically simple things: enforcing rules, posting standards, posting results in a timely manner, stuff like that. Stuff that really any OCR company should be doing anyway. What they don't do is they don't enforce things onto the company that they may not want to do. They don't say you need to have this many of this type of obstacles, you need to have this obstacle, etc. Right? You let the businesses run themselves, and you let them develop organically. But at the end of the day, it's a mutually beneficial relationship, and it is very minimal interference. Versus, I think there's been some other organizations that have tried to create like a governing body, and I don't think a small brand in the middle of the country wants to be quote unquote governed. Right? They don't like that. They don't want someone outside dictating business decisions, especially if this is a primary source of income or a large source of income. It's going to affect your bottom line. So after looking at that, I just took a look at myself and how my personal quote unquote OCR career and how I've benefited from race brands and companies, and then how those race brands have benefited from some of the work I've done, writing articles, etc. for them. So this is a first draft, so I'd be curious in the comments below or message me to share some of your thoughts with me. So the first question people might ask is, why create a OCR Pro League? And the bottom line is, it's to continue to grow the sport, bring in more sponsors, and provide additional perks to the athletes, right? So again, looking at benefiting the athletes, but also looking at benefiting the brands and their bottom line there. So here's what it looks like. So I divide the country into 5 regions. Each region hosts a quote-unquote point series race at their location where teams can earn points. And these are normal races that the brands are currently putting on, right? So you don't need to create a new event. It's just a current race you're holding that's dubbed a quote-unquote point series race. And the number of point series races in your region there is based on the number of teams. So if you're in a division with 4 teams, then there's only 4-point series races. If you're in a division with 6 teams, there's 6-point series races. And only athletes that are part of the OCR Pro League can score points for their team. So non-Pro League OCR athletes can still run in the race. They can still run in the Elite Wave. They can still win prize money. Right? So I'm not taking away from anyone who doesn't want to participate. But they just don't get added into the Pro League scoring mechanism. So essentially, there's almost like 2 races going on in one without doing a separate wave. So you're running for overall placement, running for overall prize money, but then on top of that, you pull out the people who are involved in the Pro League and you kind of rack and stack them, and to show where they finished in relation to each other to score points for this league. So again, theoretically, if I had clones of myself, I would take the results from a race and separate out the Pro League results. So again, the brand itself doesn't have to do any more work. It's all done on the backside on people who are helping run the Pro League. So the top 3 athletes for each team score points for the team, and the others do not, right? So first place would get something like 25 points, second place 24, third place 23 points, and so on. However, just because the top 3 times count, a team can still show up with more than 3 athletes in race. And if they take like the top 5 spots, then the next team's athlete will only earn 20 points, right? So as a maximum, you'd be able to get 72 points for your team, but by showing up with more people, you can essentially reduce the amount of points that another team can score. This encourages athletes to show up to the brands and race and to not just bring their 3 best guys and that's it, because they can bring more than that and force other people, down lower in the point standings. So one event in each region would be dubbed the regional championship event and worth double points. The regional championship location, which would be an event probably held in like early fall or late summer, that's normally held, would rotate every year to a different venue and a different race band, based on who they think could support it or who they think could best support it. This gives brands more buy-in and benefits as more athletes flock to their event, right? Because who doesn't want to win a regional championship event as opposed to kind of a local brand? Again, so that concept is encouraging people to show up to the races. Again, that's benefiting the brands. By having multiple pro teams, you are essentially encouraging those racers to travel to these events, which is how the brands benefit. Then for the national championships, you'd use either the North American OCR Championships, or NORAM, or OCR World Championships if it's held in the U.S. And that's at the championship event where the winners of each region would race each other to determine who's the National Pro OCR League champions. The same concept that applies to points races applies to NORAM or OCRWC. So athletes race in their normal division. In addition to appearing in the normal results, each athlete is then, again, this is in post-race, is separated into a Pro League finishers list for scoring. The winner is the team with the highest score that has also won their division. Right, so going into the NORAM or OCRWC, if you're not one of those 5 teams that won your region, then you can't win the overall. So what would be the prize for your team for winning OCR Pro League division or National Pro League championships? Initially it would largely be about, personal pride and further advertisement for the athletes that race in that brand. But realistically, you could probably get a sponsoring prize package from a couple of companies. You got to start someplace, so it'd probably be mostly pride and product initially at first. But then the goal obviously would be to increase prize money and then eventually have a large prize money. As the sport progresses, maybe it would get really big. Would it be enough to make a living off of? Yeah, probably not. But it might help cover some race costs, which I think most of us are doing this for the love of the sport and not necessarily to turn a profit you can live off of. That's kind of an overview of the concept. I'm going to talk about the divisions next, and then after the divisions, kind of really highlight some of the benefits and how I think this is a mutually beneficial concept. So looking at the races that occur in the U.S., I broke them down into 5 different divisions. Each is listed with a team name, location, and home course. In general, I chose states more often than not to kind of instill that regional pride, right? Because you want to root for your quote-unquote home team, which I think is how professional sports teams, the big ones, right, do it. They are aligned to a city or a region, and then for some reason people just flock to that, and they're like, oh, I'm from New York, I love, insert New York sports team here. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with some of the teams. However, when there's multiple teams within a single state, I chose cities, sometimes to give that brand better branding, assuming the city is relatively well known. Why did I choose these teams? Well, it's actually pretty simple. So these names and brands are OCR World Championship qualifying events. So again, I'm kind of continuing to build off of that mutually beneficial relationship that OCR-WC has established. The OCR-WC has a baseline for a standard of events. Now, so on this list, I included as many options as possible based off of qualifying events, which allows a couple of brands to say, no thanks, not interested, and still have the concept moving forward, right? So it does not hinging upon one brand saying yes. All right, so for the Northeast region, I have Binghamton Noob Sanity, which is obviously Noob Sanity, Rhode Island Fit, which is Fit Challenge, New England Bone Frogs, which is Bone Frogs, their home course, obviously, Boston Maniacs, which is Rugged Maniac, Greenville Vikings, Viking OCR at Sunny Hill, Exeter Boulder Dash, which is the Boulder Dash run, Northeast Spartans, and Long Island Holy Grail, so the Tough Mudder for that last one. And I wrote this article about a year ago, so I realized some of these brands have decided they're calling it at the end of 2022. But just to kind of give you an idea, I'm going to keep going without modifying anything. Also, I'm tired of rewriting this article because I think this is the third time I've rewritten it. Our East Coast would be New Jersey Goliaths, so that's named after Goliathon. New York City Challengers, named after City Challenge. Maryland Savages, named after Savage Race. East Coast Mudders, named after Tough Mudder. And Eastern Agoge, again, named after Spartan Race. Southeast would be Florida Mud Titans, named after Mud Titan. North Carolina Driven, which is Driven, formerly Green Beret Challenge. Georgia Phoenixes, named after Phoenix OCR. Alabama Barbarians, named after Barbarian Challenge. Southeast Legionnaires, named after Tough Mudder. Texas Trifectas, named after Spartan Race. And obviously Spartan and Tough Mudder are the biggest brands with multiple races in multiple regions, which is why they get multiple teams in multiple divisions. So North Central would be the Wisconsin Yetis, named after Abominable Snow Race. Illinois Frontline, named after Frontline OCR. Minnesota Badasses, named after Badass Dash. Colorado Cirrus, named after Cirrus OCR. Holiday Hills Highlanders, named after Highlander Assault. As you can see, Illinois has a lot of local brands that are OCR or WC qualifiers, so they kind of get a little bit more unique in that area. And then finally, my home base as of now, the Midwest. So you'd have the Tulsa Conquerors, named after Conquer the Gauntlet. Oklahoma Lions, named after Battle of the Lions. Kansas City Sasquatches, named after Casey Timber Challenge. Coshocton Indians, named after Indian Mud Run. Ohio Black Swamp, named after Black Swamp Dash. And finally, Columbus War Machines, named after War X. So I just covered a lot of the country, but you may be thinking, where is the West or Northwest division? And the bottom line is they simply don't have enough qualifying events. Besides Spartan and Tough Mudder, there are not really any smaller brands that are OCR-WC qualifying events as of this writing/recording. If this concept becoming a reality, my guess would be the bigger brands might be hesitant to commit. So not sure there'd be a market for a West or Northwest division. Without Spartan and Tough Mudder agreement, I think this is still viable. It has less of an impact. As Tough Mudder and Spartan are the leaders in the industry, I feel like, again, because they're in charge, they don't feel as strong a need to reach down to help the smaller brands, and they have less to gain, versus the smaller brands have more to gain from kind of aligning with Spartan or Tough Mudder interests. I chose race brands as opposed to companies like Beat Elite or Yancey Camp because the races are 100% invested in OCR. When the brands, while they may be largely OCR focused, they may not be 100% in, right? So brands like Beat Elite or Yancey Camp get most or a good amount of their business from OCR, but they aren't inextricably linked to the success of the sport, right? If OCR disappears, those brands can still survive by shifting their focus. Furthermore, when a race brand gives one of their athletes a free entry into the race, it technically doesn't cost them anything, versus a brand like Beat Elite would have to essentially pay out of pocket to get someone into a race. I think companies like that could work, but in my opinion, having race brands is the preferred option, again, because they're inextricably linked to OCR and the success of OCR. All right, so this is all a good pipe dream, right? But what are the benefits? Why would athletes want to do this? Why would race brands want to do this? So I'm kind of going to break it down by category. So benefits to race brands, benefits to athletes, benefit to spectators, and benefits with brands associated with OCR, right? So we'll start with the benefits to race series. So the first biggest benefit is it creates a team to highlight your race series, identifies the state and city that it occurs in, right? So you're drawing information on a national stage, but also a regional, as your athletes will probably be from in and around your region, so they'll be able to advertise for you. 2, provides additional advertisement by the athletes on your team doing well and appearing in other races, right? So if you're, this is the concept we use for Conquer the Gauntlet, Mud Gear Battle of the Lions, where, showing up at a Tough Mudder event and when I podium, I'm wearing a race brand shirt of a different brand. It highlights that brand to a different audience of OCR people. 3, it encourages high-level athletes to come back to your series by providing them a goal to shoot for. Some athletes that may have been involved in the sport for a while may be losing interest, or, they may be like, all right, well, I won this race, I won that race, or I podiumed here or there. What's next? What else can I do to kind of further my personal hobby / career? And I think, people trying to get on a pro team is a good option. It's something that keeps them involved in the sport for longer, which, again, benefits the series because now you have athletes returning multiple times year after year. So exclusive benefit to the big two, Tough Mudder and Spartan, are allowed to have multiple teams in multiple regions to represent their series. Plus, in the largest brands with the most funding, would likely be able to pull in the top athletes. And we'll get to that a little more on kind of how this benefits the athletes. Still sticking with benefits of the race series, with events being point series and regional championships, they would get a larger draw of athletes and spectators for those points events. Additionally, series have complete control over their team and manage the teams as they see fit. So, if you want your team to just be brand ambassadors, that's fine. If you want the best athletes, that's fine too. You want to pay them $1 million a year, right? Sure, that's awesome. You want to pay them $0, that's okay too, right? It's really up to the brands themselves what benefits they provide. I think some race series might provide their athletes with travel, hotel, and race expenses, while others might simply give them a really good discount code for races along with some free merchandise. So again, not taking any control away from the brands. The brand determines how many races their athletes are required to run in. So if you want your athlete to run in 10 races a year, then that's what you make them do. If you wanted to make them just run in yours, then that's what you make them do. So you're just giving a lot of flexibility and control to the brands. And that includes stuff like social media posts, if there's any sort of mandatory of that. The freedom doesn't force companies to incur expenses they do not want or do not think provide a profitable return. How the series treats and provides benefits to their athletes will determine the quote-unquote cost they incur. There's no mid-season ads, which will encourage athletes to race for multiple years. The teams with bigger benefits will draw better names, kind of just like major league sports teams with more funds to spend on salaries. And then kind of the final benefit to race series, right, it draws more attention to the sport. All right, so how does this benefit athletes on a team? So, ideally it's free or at least very cheap race entry for the point series. I assume most brands would give free entry into their own race companies' brands. For the ones that are occurring in the region but not necessarily part of the brand you represent, it would be something like the lowest price guarantee for the other series in the league, right? Because we know brands like to offer discounts all the time, but wouldn't it be nice if there was like a pro code and essentially you're like, all right, well, I can sign up even a week out and I still get the lowest price point from 9 months ago. So again, the brand is still getting benefit by having someone pay and show up to the race, but the athlete is also getting a benefit because he has a little more flexibility on his schedule, and then on top of that is also saving money by signing up at the lowest price possible. And that's not something they could share. That's just something for that athlete to personally use. Another benefit is it forms small groups of athletes that can act as one voice to benefit each other. So this helps getting sponsors and benefits as a team. It's easier to get sponsors if we have a league with officially recognized pro teams. So I took this concept from the Conquer the Gauntlet Mud Gear Battle of the Lions team. So that's what we do when we get team sponsors. We act as a single voice, and we reach out to brands for support. And sometimes it's product, sometimes it's a mix of product and cash. But either way, it benefits our athletes, and it benefits the brands because we're advertising for them. And I think we've been doing pretty good, but I think it would have even more success. And I think it's one of those like rising tide raises all boats type concepts, where if we were part of a larger league, then we could be like, yeah, we won the regional championships for the Midwest, or we won the national championships, or et cetera, right? So, Because right now we're a pro obstacle course racing team, but there's no pro league. I don't bring that up, but there's no pro league, so it's kind of like a vague term for some people. So again, not taking any control away from athletes. Athletes can still race in whatever races they want as long as their pro league team is okay with it. So feel like racing all 6-point series races, that's great. Only can make 2 this year due to scheduling conflicts. That's okay too. The benefit is if you only show up to 2 races that are point series events, then you'll probably have trouble getting on the team next year. And then finally, again, kind of with all of them, it draws more attention to the sport. All right, so I think we covered some of the benefits that athletes on the teams would get, but so you may be listening to this and be like, well, I'm not podium type guy, so how would I benefit from this? And I think there is benefits to spectators, open wave athletes, and even competitive athletes that are not on a team. So the first one is it provides regional pride. So just like a baseball, football, or hockey team, you have a quote-unquote home team that you can cheer for at other events. 2, provides bigger goals for current athletes or new athletes entering the sport. Again, like I talked about before, when you enter the sport, a lot of people have all right, I want to achieve X, Y, and Z. This provides another goalpost out on the field for you to shoot for. Some people may be able to get it very easily, and other people it may take 5-10 years of work. But that's 5-10 years of work that someone's involved in the sport. So another benefit would be draws more attention to the sport, which I've mentioned a couple of times. But the benefit of that is draws more participants, which brings more money, which allows for bigger and better obstacles and a better overall race experience. Right? That's where I think we all kind of benefit. If more people are showing up, the bigger benefit it all is, because as we know in OCR, the competitive or elite wave is such a small percentage of what actually brings in money and makes the sport sustainable. So if we can, essentially use our accomplishments on social media and, in person as for advertising, then hopefully get more participants to come and race the different race brands. Additionally, it doesn't exclude anyone that does not want to be in the pro league, right? So other elite athletes are not required to be on a team. New athletes entering the sport can still race in the pro or elite wave and still win prize money, right? So unlike, I know Spartan, you now have to essentially qualify for the pro or elite wave. This takes away that barrier, not for Spartan, but for, it allows us to have a pro league without being like, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z to be in the be in a prize money wave. And as we've seen in mandatory obstacle completion, you can have a complete unknown come in who's fast and good at obstacles, and or have someone who is a high level guy have a bad day, and it changes the results. So I think allowing people to sign up for that cash money wave is still a good option. So basically they still race the same way every pro elite competitive OCR athlete is racing right now, and just like anyone can come in and win the CrossFit Games, anyone can still win the OCR World Championships or NORAM. The OCR League basically rewards those athletes who spent years in the sport and encourages athletes to come back to race. All right, moving right along, if you're still with me here. Let's talk about benefits to brands associated with OCR, right? So there's a lot of brands that, like I was talking about at the beginning, are not inextricably linked to the success of OCR, but a lot of their profit comes from OCR, right? So Mudgear, VJ Shoes, Beat Elite, Yancey Camp, Brute Force Sandbags, Rec Bags, Hyperwear. A lot of these brands have a large investment in the OCR industry. So it benefits them by having more advertising for their stuff, continues to grow the sport and provide expanded market for product, and it allows brands to say things like the official shoe of the New York Vikings pro OCR team. So teams would be able to decide what brands they want to use as their quote-unquote official shoe or their official supplement or their official racewear, etc. But we could also have brands that essentially buy their way in to be the official sock of all of OCR Pro League. And to do that, the brand would essentially have to give free product to everyone in the league. Or if you just want to have, all right, Mudgear is the official sock of the Oklahoma Lions team, then Mudgear gives us free product in exchange for advertising for them. So yeah, just giving flexibility and allowing people to choose what sponsors they want to go with, and if they think the sponsor's not giving enough, they can try to get a different sponsor and a bigger one. So again, that encourages freedom. It encourages competitiveness as far as like what the brands are giving you, and with the ability to change every year, it makes sure we're not getting locked into something that's not going to be beneficial for everyone involved. All right, so hopefully a couple of you are still with me at this point. I've been talking fast and throwing a lot of information out there. And while I think it is a sound plan, right, it does require a lot of companies to quote unquote agree to field a team. And based off the number of teams, I think we have playroom, right? So I don't need 100% buy-in across every brand that I named. And as I mentioned earlier, some of these brands I've decided they're going to close up shop at the end of 22. And so even if there's just 3 teams in a region, to me that's success and enough to get the ball rolling, get things off the ground. And some of the teams already exist, right? So Mudgear Battle of the Lions, we have a team. Noob Sanity, they're not called the Binghamton Noob Sanity at this point, but they are. I mean, that's essentially who they are. Yeah, so those are kind of easy transitions for that to happen. Another thing is people may think of like, well, why not go with OCR clubs, right? So something like New England Spartans or something like that. I stuck with race brands because they're kind of tied to the league because that's how they're making their money. And it's a lot easier to get, if I'm representing KC Timber Challenge, if I'm representing that brand, it's a lot easier for them to give me a free race than if I say I am representing KC OCR. Now can I have a free race? And I'm going to wear a KC OCR jersey at other brands, right? It doesn't provide the same advertising when you actually go and race outside of your little circle. To me, some of the biggest sticking points would be bigger brands, right, who see less benefit because they're currently doing great. Although, like I mentioned, I did provide some opportunities like Spartan or Tough Mudder having the ability to field multiple teams. Or kind of one of the other holdups would be smaller race brands, right? So, example, Conquer the Gauntlet has essentially, 2 or 3 full-time employees, which is the owners, and that's about it. So I think some brands like that or KC Timber, might be worried about how do I quote unquote manage a team. And this is where if I had clones of myself, I would just get this off the ground and running. Managing a team would be designated a team captain. So essentially you don't have to do any of the work. The brands don't have to do any of the work, right? So the idea is the brands do as little as possible. They get maximum benefit, but the athletes also get some benefit for advertising for those brands. So the hardest part, for standing this up would probably be actually just be finding motivated team captains to reach out and get things going for each of those teams. Now, I'm technically the team captain for Mudgear Battle of the Lions pro team, and there's a lot of work that goes on in the background that people, don't realize, right? So if you go to the BOTL pro team website, right, like I'm the one who physically created all that. We have a secret group where don't get excited. There's nothing exciting going on in there. It's how we manage and organize information. All right, who's racing this weekend? What are the results from last weekend? Who's doing technique videos this week? What sponsors do we need to promote? Are there sponsors requesting anything specific? So there's a lot of back stuff going on that gives benefit to the brands that are associated with the pro team. So it's not all benefits for the athletes. It does require some work on your part. And some people might think that, well, why don't I just go get a job at McDonald's? I'll probably make a better hourly rate there than I will doing social media and stuff for OCR. Then you're probably right. But, we are involved in the sport because we love it, and it's nice to get some occasional perks from the work we're doing while still enjoying our activity. Kind of the other caveat I would make was, athletes would only be allowed to officially represent one team. Just to keep things simple and avoid it being very confusing where you have an athlete representing multiple teams, right? So you're on one pro team and that's it. In our pro team, that's what we do. You're not allowed to be on quote unquote multiple pro teams, but you can be on multiple clubs, right? So I could be on the pro team for a brand, but then I can support other brands like Tough Mudder or KC Timber Challenge or right. So Strength and Speed. Strength and Speed technically does not have a pro team. We have some really high-level athletes in our group. We've got some people who are, lower-level athletes or just starting out. But the idea of Strength and Speed was just a group of people trying to get better. So whether you're at the top and trying to just get a little higher onto the mountain there, or if you're on the bottom and you're just trying to finish any race with completing all obstacles, right? That's why kind of Strength and Speed was founded. It was founded on getting better regardless of your fitness level. At the end of the day, don't you want your series or your favorite home race brand or region to be a national OCR Pro League champion, right? And I think that would be a cool thing, a point of pride that both the brands could advertise and the athletes could advertise on their quote-unquote race resumes. So that was kind of my first solo deep dive episode where I just kind of dove into a specific topic. I've got a couple other ones mentally prepared in my mind. If you like this, shoot me a message, let me know you like it, and I'll do some more like this. Or if you didn't like this and you're like, no, let's just go back to interviewing people, we can do that too. Just my schedule has been super busy, and I look at the rest of September, and I have stuff planned almost every night and almost every weekend. So there's not a whole lot of playroom in there. And I still want to put out content. So I know 2023 will be also very busy with the amount of stuff I have going on. I should have a little more time and space in 2024 that allows for more consistent content production. So maybe we'll bump it back up to 3 episodes a month. We'll see. We'll kind of see how things play out and how my personal life, hobbies, and job continue to transition. I think one of the other critics of this plan is like, well, if we do this, then there'll be all sorts of, quote-unquote OCR pros who are not in very good shape, which is largely a subjective term, but I'm not here to protect the quote-unquote the word pro, right? I'm here to grow the sport, benefit athletes, and benefit brands, and I think there's ways to do that, and the people who've been around in the sport for a while, to give them goals and options to get some sort of benefit and some sort of cost reduction. I'm not saying, they have to get everything paid for, their travel, their hotel, their races, but at least saving a little bit of money, when you multiply that over how often some of us race and how many years some of us race for, right? That can add up pretty substantially. In the military, we have a term called tab protectors, right? So if you go to Ranger School, there are some guys, or Special Forces, right? You go there and you make it through, and typically when you go through, you don't look very strong, right? You might have barely passed. But then once they get through and they've got their tab, then they look back and they're like, oh, well, I don't think anyone else deserves to have a tab. So they kind of guard that tab and are overly harsh on people. I think some people who've been on, quote-unquote OCR pro teams might have that kind of tab protector or pro protector status in their mind. But, honestly, if we use the term pro on a lot more people, it doesn't necessarily take away my accomplishments or, any of my teammates' accomplishments. And to me, I think it helps. I think it again, it's one of those rising tide raises all boats type thing. Because then as a pro team, you're beating other pro teams, right? And then if a pro team is made up of all mediocre athletes, then and you're a better athlete, you can show up, continue to race, put your time into the sport, and then you can get that quote unquote status and use that to reach out to get either personal sponsors or team sponsors. Again, that can help reduce cost. And that's what I've done personally. I've had very few sponsorships and brands that I've partnered with that have given me like huge benefits. It happens occasionally, but the majority of stuff has just been like nickel and diming my way to success, and just a lot of all right, well, if I don't have to pay for supplements, then that saves a couple $100s a year. Or if I don't have to pay for shoes, or I don't have to pay for chafing whatever it may be, when you start adding that up and then you times it by, I've been doing OCR consistently. End of 2014 is kind of when I started OCR on a regular basis. When you add that up and the number of races I've done since then, right, it substantially adds up. I started calculating some of the cost, and it was pretty wild, both on benefits received and how much I've kind of put into the sport. But at the same time, there's a lot of personal experience and self feeling of accomplishment and stories, and the crossing the finish line after a good race is it's not something you can't buy that, and you don't get that at every race. It doesn't even necessarily happen at my biggest races, right? So some of my favorite moments in OCR, example was Wichita, Conquer the Gauntlet 2017. Got stuck at a rig, was there for 30, 45 minutes. And I'm sorry, it's 2018, because it was 2 weeks before Endure the Gauntlet. And I'm basically on my 7th or 8th attempt on this rig, and I just send it as hard as I can, right? I'm hanging from a rope, and instead of landing gracefully on the shore, because my legs weren't going to reach, I just kind of leaned forward with my body and kind of slammed my shoulder first. And got up and screamed. We got on video. One of my favorite moments in OCR. I came in like 7th or 8th place, right? Irrelevant. It was just that feeling of crossing the finish line. You can't get that, you can't buy that feeling. It's got to be something you experience, and it has to happen organically. You can't force that experience to happen. I want those experiences. I want more of those experiences for myself, but I also want experiences like that for other people, so they can kind of fall in love with the sport the same way, me and my teammates have, both on Strength and Speed and on Mudgear Battle Lines Pro Team. So I think that's it. Some of the other topics I was considering doing a deep dive on are just kind of like OCR in the Olympics and kind of benefits and drawbacks to that, and kind of a plan for that and how that might work out, and how if or it would alter the sport as we know it. And if you like some of this kind of pro OCR athlete semantics, we can dive into that on episode 2. I was just talking to one of the people I work with who works, essentially she's a soccer player, right, for the military, and I was just mentioning how most pro sports, the people have other jobs, right? When we think of pro sports, or we default to baseball, soccer, football, hockey, basketball, where the people that's their primary profession. They're being paid millions of dollars. But most pro sports, they have other jobs to supplement their income, right? Because if your sport doesn't play year round, you're probably not getting paid year round. 2, if you get injured, right, all of a sudden your revenue stream drops, especially if you're not under some sort of long-term contract. This is like if it's like pay by game. And 3, just a lot of sports are not super spectator friendly, right? I think people try to compare OCR to a lot of other sports, and a lot of times the comparison is not quote unquote 1-to-1, right? We're not filling stadiums with people watching OCR. It's not happening. It's the model for pro OCR is a lot closer to running or endurance sports than it is to basketball, soccer, baseball, etc. At North American Championships and OCR World Championships, when the Pro Heat runs the 3K, it's usually done at around noon on Friday, or early afternoon on Friday, and there's a big crowd there. They're watching, they're cheering. It's super exciting. I highly recommend, if you're going to OCR World Championships at the end of September, you stay and watch the Pro 3K race, because it is fun. However, no one's traveling to Stratton, Vermont at the end of September solely to watch the pros race, right? They're racing themselves, but they're staying to watch the pros race. And I think that's a big difference with how much money is coming into the sport, and why sports like baseball, soccer, I keep saying soccer because there's a Sporting KC, is a soccer team in Kansas City. I know most of the country does not have huge soccer teams, but that's a huge difference for how those companies can make money and sell sponsorships and pay their athletes. I think with the Pro League, again, essentially we're creating a unified front. So maybe a brand like Coca-Cola wants to come in and sponsor the Pro League, and then all of a sudden we can pay athletes, and we have a large revenue stream, and there's Coca-Cola banners everywhere, even though it's terrible for you. But the other sports teams seem to have a problem with throwing the Coca-Cola banners up everywhere. So, just kind of some food for thought and kind of a future plan, and some good idea fairies here floating around. All right, I think that about wraps it up. I do have this written in an article form, so maybe it'll come out one day on the OCR Report or Mudgear or OCR Buddy. I write for all 3 companies. Again, my goal is to grow the sport. I'm not necessarily tied to a brand. I just want the sport to grow again, because I think everyone will benefit from it. If you enjoyed this, please share it around. If you want to volunteer your services and help get this off the ground, we can start talking. I can start making a list of people, and maybe in a year or 2, when I have a little more time, we can actually start making some of it happen. If you want to solicit some other input, feel free to share it around to get other people's opinions, shoot me a message, etc. And then if you like what I said, or you think some of my stuff is interesting, again, check out my articles on any of those websites, on Adventury. Check out my books. My books are all available off my website, teamstrengthspeed.com. We got my biography on there, Ultra-OCR Man, covers some combat deployments and some of the endurance feats I've done. My newest book is called On Endurance, Practical Guide to Unlocking the Secrets of Superhuman Performance. Again, that takes information from my podcast and condenses it into like a step-by-step guide for improving endurance. I really like how that came out. And Strength and Speed's Guide to Elite Obstacle Course Racing is the updated book of my best-selling Guide to Elite OCR. I will have a booth at OCR World Championships. Come by and say hi. If you want to discuss this, please do. Swing by and say it there. You can also pick up my books there in person. You can pick up Legments there in person. I'll have my Normatec boots there if you need to recharge your legs in between races. And I'm going to do some fundraising for Back-to-Back Ministries. So Back-to-Back Ministries will have a booth also at OCR World Championships. If you donate via the link I have, you'll see my QR code at the event at my booth. And you keep your band. So I need both. That is both keeping your band and making the donation. You don't have to keep your band at every event. Just keep your band at one. I will give you one of my charity belt buckles that I've used for some of my previous events. Right. So the idea is, one, I get rid of some of the extra charity belt buckles I have. And then two, we raise money for a good cause. And then three, you get some an additional perk for keeping your band at OCR World Championships occurring at Stratton, Vermont at the end of September. All right, I will catch all of you later. It's been fun. Out.